Hello there. We are going to talk about a truly controversial jazz figure, starting with his name, Thelonious Monk. Thelonious Monk. Thelonious Spear Monk. Now, Thelonious, he got from his father. That was his father's first name. But the Spear, that came from his mother's father, his maternal grandfather, whose name was Spear Betts. So you put those together and you got Thelonious Spear Monk. Born in 1917, Rocky Mount, North Carolina. Okay, now eventually they ended up in New York, in Manhattan, very close to the area upon which the Lincoln Center sits today. Their original neighborhood was torn down, but there are remnants of it not far from the site of Lincoln Center. But that is where little Thelonious grew up. He started playing piano at an early age, but I guess he was a little bit adverse to instruction and kind of taught himself after a while. And that may explain his unorthodox technique that we'll go into a little bit later. We do know that he must have been very, very intelligent. He went to a nearby school for the gifted. He stayed there for, I think, about 5 years, but he never graduated. And he did not graduate because the keyboard, the piano, and the organ, did not realize this, he was an organ player, and that captivated him to the point that he left school in order to go on the road with, check this out, a Christian evangelist. That's right. He was a music director for an evangelist. That was his very first job. Organ player, music director for this evangelist that's traveling all over doing what evangelists do and paying little Monk to play that organ. It didn't take long for Monk to realize that that was not his calling. He wanted to play a little jazz, and of course he had some unorthodox ideas about it. Now, he was well steeped in the stride piano, very active left-hand thing, you know, James P. Johnson, Art Tatum, Duke Ellington, people like that use that style, and of course he copied them quite a bit. But he was also prone to angular melodies in his compositions and lots of dissonance in the harmonies and sometimes in the melody. And some of these things, people would say, oh, it has to be a mistake. No, 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 that was purposeful. He had this thing that said there are no wrong notes on the piano. So no matter what he played, he always found a way to say, that's exactly what should be played in this situation, no matter what conventional harmonic tradition and traditional wisdom might suggest. He ended up being a part of the house band at Minton's Playhouse, along with Charlie Christian and those other guys, Dizzy and whatnot. They're trying to create this new music. Kenny Clark, you know, this new music. Later, Sonny Rollins, this new music called bebop. Of course, his great friend Bud Powell was also there. Big difference between he and Bud. Bud had this flawless technique. Bud's like the bird of the piano. And Monk was a little choppy, a little angular, and some people even said he was the elephant of the piano. Yeah, he played with a heavy attack, and sometimes he even used 2 fingers to play one note just to put a little more weight on it. So for him, it was all about the emotion, the weight, the silence, the space, the unorthodox rhythms and angular intervals and harmonies more than anything else. And of course, this was prime real estate as bebop, this up-tempo, very angular music with very complex harmonic structures was just starting to evolve. And there was Monk in the middle of it. Now, his career as a recording artist, performer in jazz, other than mentions, was quite fractured. He had some people who thought he was the greatest genius ever, and there were other people who thought that the less they heard of him, the better. Lorraine Gordon, who was married to Alpha Lion, big record executive, really thought Monk was the very end, and she took him everywhere, even persuading the Village Vanguard to book him for 1 solid week. And they did, because she had some powerful influences, and her husband was Alfred Lion. And in 1 week at the Village Vanguard, not a single person showed up to see Thelonious Monk. Not one. In a whole week. So obviously he was not very popular, was not selling a whole lot of records or anything else. But that did not last, because check this out. In the history of this music, there have only been 5 jazz musicians on the cover of Time. I think it's like Louis Armstrong, Duke Ellington, Dave Brubeck, Wynton Marsalis, and believe it or not, Thelonious Monk. So even though there are people who absolutely despised everything he stood for and did not want to hear anything he played, there were others who considered him a genius. And eventually, the genius opinion won out. Great composer, M. Monk Bud, Ruby My Dear, Straight No Chaser, Round Midnight. We can go on and on. His compositions are just unbelievable. And as a composer, he has more jazz musicians recording music that he wrote than any jazz musician in history except for Duke Ellington. So as you see, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. There are some people who went, oh yeah, Monk's a man, and the other people going, oh my God, I don't care if I hear another note of that again, which means he wasn't a quiet taste. And he was not for the lightweight, for the trendy. He was for those who had a serious interest in the music and had big open ears and open minds. His first recording, believe it or not, was by Coleman Hawkins, who was known for the old tenor style swing and whatnot. Well, there he was. Hired Monk to play with them? Yeah. Coleman could hear it. Later on, when Monk's stock started to rise, he played Coleman Hawkins back by hiring him to play on a recording with another young firebrand of a musician on tenor sax, John Coltrane. Look at that. Thelonious Monk, Bean, from way back in the swing area, and Train, who we're still trying to catch up with. That's right. So Monk had that kind of vision, that kind of understanding, that kind of wide berth of taste. And although his technique in the main was very cumbersome, very angular, very harsh attack, percussive approach to playing, he could, in the midst of all that, play flawlessly executed runs, which means that his technique was a choice. It wasn't that he was a poorly trained pianist and he had no technique, as it was, this was his choice manner of expression. And every now and then he would demonstrate his pianistic talents with these runs that came out of nowhere, usually whole tone runs. Yeah, he liked those whole tone scales a whole lot. He liked all sorts of harmonies a whole lot, especially the unexpected, especially stretching the realm of harmonic possibility, especially wider, unusual melodic intervallics, especially syncopated rhythms. He recorded many albums with all sorts of people. He was pretty much the Pied Piper of bebop. And he played and he recorded until he just got too sick to go on. And then he stopped and he waited for his train to come on into the station and take him away. He had many people who pushed to support him, including Baroness Nika, who also took care of Charlie Parker in his final years. Thelonious Monk is a person who needs to be listened to, really listened. It's not easy listening music. It's the stuff you gotta concentrate on, and you gotta listen over and over until you grow into it, because he is gonna stretch your ears, he's gonna stretch your mind, he's gonna stretch your understanding of what jazz and swing is. And we thank you, Thelonious Monk, that you did stop playing the organ, and you did stop touring the South as a accompanist for an evangelist, and that you did go into Minton's and help create the new jazz, bebop, and everything that followed it. Thelonious Spear Monk. Thank you.